Hello and welcome to the Gambling Files podcast, the podcast that says this is part 2 of the Andrew Rhodes interview. My name's Jon Bruford. I'm just one of your hosts, 50% if you will, joined by Fintan Costello, the other 75%. Fintan, hello.
Hello, John.
How are you?
Obviously, we left it on a cliffhanger.
Cliffhanger,
like proper Batman style, where like Batman and Robin are hanging off they're tied up by the Joker, and Robin's freaking out a little bit because he doesn't know how he's going to get rescued, and Batman whips out his bat thingy and just saves the day in the next episode.
You're a dirty bird, Fintan. You're a dirty bird.
That's this episode. It's amazing.
So,
Big
Andrew
episode.
Rhodes.
Big episode.
So in this episode, we talk about affordability checks.
The 3% of accounts that need affordability checks.
Yeah.
That was a big one.
We talk about the industry forum.
Yeah. We talk about the white paper implementation, personal data, plus some favorite classic The Gambling Files questions as well.
Spiritual dojo. That one comes up.
How many John Grisham books you've read, those kind of things.
Yeah. Lightweight. It's as ever, it's another terrific episode. You can follow us on LinkedIn. Hopefully we're over 1,000 followers now, but we'll see. You can follow us on Twitter under @gamblingfiles, I think that is. Substack, thegamblingfiles.substack.com. And like I say, on LinkedIn, also, I'm Jon Bruford. I'm on LinkedIn, and so is Fintan Costello. He's also on LinkedIn. So, give us a bit of dopamine.
Also, hit subscribe on Apple and Spotify and Google Podcast, wherever you listen to your podcasts.
But I didn't want to say that. I didn't want to insult the listeners. Do you know what I mean? You did.
I'm happy to insult people at scale. Let's do this. Give us a subscribe. It really helps the juice the algorithms. We also need to thank our sponsors.
We really do.
We really do have to thank our sponsors.
There are 3 this week, Fintan.
There are 3 this week.
Would you like to introduce them?
I will. So first off, Clarion Gaming, the famous producers of the ICE conference. So make sure to book your tickets for ICE 2024. They're also running events at G2E this week, if you're listening the week of the 9th of October. So there's the Ampersand event at G2E. Definitely check that out. Really good bunch. And they're fantastic, and they've been really, really great to us. So we're very grateful. Also have BWise Media. So BWise Media, super smart bunch of guys. They've been doing what they do for the last 10 years. If you're a media owner, you own sports content, football content, anything like that, and you want to monetize it better, give Sebastian a bell.
And the key to what they do, of course, is they have exclusivity with some of the biggest outlets,
which is the flip side of it as well. So if you want to monetize your content, they can help you with that. If you want to buy sports content globally, they can do that, and they can do it through their exclusive content, and they can do it better than anybody else. So really, really, so great for operators, great for media owners.
Everybody wins when you involve BWise Media.
Win-win. A lot of proprietary tech. They're doing some really, really smart stuff on the back end that others aren't doing. Really, really good creative. They were showing me some of their native stuff. It's super smart, and it's exactly what you should be doing. So if you're tired of burning your media budget on crap inventory, give Sebastian a shout. Third, last but not least, we've got Gaming Recruitment Solutions. Brilliant recruitment company. Do senior, high-level exec type recruitment all the way through to floor staff. Also do online through their new Malta office. Really good bunch. Lovely guys. Know their stuff. they've worked in casinos. They really understand what you're looking for. So from a recruitment perspective, you really want a recruiter that understands your industry and the roles and has been in your shoes, rather than just some kid in a bad suit charging you however many percentages of the salary for.
And there are some bad suits out there.
Spamming LinkedIn. Much better than that. So we'd highly recommend. And our website's grs-recruit.com.
It is a hyphen.
And that's our 3 sponsors, John.
That's great news, Fintan. So let's go on to this episode and re-meet Mr. Andrew Rhodes.
Yeah.
Welcome to part 2 of the Gambling Files podcast's interview with Mr. Andrew Rhodes of the UK Gambling Commission. Now, for anybody out there who's a fan of the book or film Misery, they might remember Kathy Bates railing about dirty birds and how they used to cheat in these Saturday morning serials. The old Flash Gordons, the Buck Rogers, the Buster Crab series. I mean, those things were amazing, and I grew up watching them. But they'd have a cliffhanger at the end of the episode, right, where you'd see somebody like in a doomed space rocket on fire. You'd see it crash into the sun quite clearly, killing everybody on board. And the next episode would start with them miraculously escaping in a total re-edit of what happened. And it sent her character into fits of apoplectic rage. So be prepared to find your own level of apoplectic rage, as we don't start with affordability checks as promised in the last episode, but we begin, like the dirty birds we are, with white paper implementation. Fintan, take it away.
Thanks, John. I really wasn't sure where you were going with that at all. And the way you changed between pre-recording chat straight into that is a work of art. It's
why they pay me the big bucks.
It's exactly. So Andrew, obviously we kind of touched on, obviously the white paper was the big document. It's what the industry's been waiting for ages. There was a lot covered in the white paper, and then there was a lot of recommendations, but then realistically, as you kind of walked your way through the white paper, it was consultation. My rather cynical perspective of that was it was just an easy way of kicking the can down the road for another few years. Buys everybody time, maybe there's a government change between now and then and anything could happen type stuff. What does implementation of the white paper look like, and how's it going?
So I think we should probably start with the consultation bit. So the white paper isn't a bill going through Parliament. It's not going to turn into an act. It's not going to turn into the Gambling Act, 2023, 24, whatever. So a lot of what the white paper does relies on, broadly speaking, relies on 3 things. One is a very small number of primary legislation changes which DCMS will need to do. Then there are some secondary legislation changes which DCMS needs to do because the Commission's not a legislative body. And the third bit, which is the biggest part of it, relies on LCCP changes. And anything that we change in the licensing codes of conduct and practice, so for basically our rule book, we have to consult on. So it's not a way of kind of kicking the can down the road. It's just a legal requirement that we need to go through in order to do that. So how is it going? Well, the first set of consultations has been out for a while now, and it closes on the 18th. And there's obviously been a lot of interest in particular parts of that, which we'll come back to. Then we've got some winter consultations planned for later this year, which we will put out. But there's other work that we're doing in the background, which isn't based around consultations. So that's work that we can do there. There are things that we've got to do around kind of machine standards and things like that as well, which work alongside it. I think the bit that everybody then comes back to is, well, how long until you've delivered it all? And the government was pretty clear it wanted the big stuff, if I call it that, done sort of within the first year. And that's, I mean, to certainly have consulted on it and have next steps, etc. That is well on course, and we're sort of exactly where we'd expect to be timing wise. But there is a lot to get through. I think there are about something like 68 different work streams that the Gambling Commission's got to deliver. I think there are 80 odd that we're involved in overall. So there is a lot of work to do, and anything that is a rule book change, if I call it that, then that will need a consultation, and they've got to be proper consultations. Otherwise, you're obviously not doing your job in a sort of lawful way.
So what's involved for those that aren't familiar with it? What's involved in a consultation? What happens? It's you put out some questions, you gather responses, or what happens?
So for a consultation, you set out what the proposal is. So in this case, we've directly lifted from the white paper and tested with DCMS that they're happy that the consultation reflects exactly what the white paper was doing. And they've said, yes, it does. So you put out the proposals. In this case, we've got a 12-week consultation, and you ask people for their responses on that. So you ask them specific questions about how they think you should do certain things, or whether they think some things are possible. It depends on what the questions are. When you receive those, you then review them, and then you publish a consultation response. So you say, here's what we've received, this is what we're going to do about it, this is what we think about it, and here's the course of action that we're now going to take. So some consultations are more complex than others. So you can have a relatively uneventful consultation on, an extension to particular things, or something that doesn't garner a huge amount of interest. Or you can have something like, financial risk checks, which garners a huge amount of interest. So what you have to do then is publish a response to that consultation, so everybody can see what you received and what you're going to do as a result of that.
And how, and obviously I understand constellations and stuff are ongoing right now as well, so it's okay if you can't answer this, but obviously you put out the request, everything's kind of sanity checked, you put it out, and then you get either a little bit of interest or a lot of interest, and obviously there's a spectrum of views and opinions on that. How does that get weighed up, or how do you filter the signal from the noise, so to speak? Because obviously there's going to be some random stuff it's the aliens, and then there'll be or whatever, right? There's guaranteed there's something completely random in there that just they thought they were doing their online shopping or something. And then you're going to have, we talked about in the previous episode, we talked about the two extremes. So you're going to have the very anti-gambling industry stuff of shut it all down, this industry shouldn't exist. And obviously there's more nuance beside that as well. And then there's the pro-gambling, won't somebody think of the ponies type stuff. There's the headline. The pro-industry stuff, which obviously it's got its own kind of thing. But how do you weigh and measure that, and how do you draw conclusions or insights or feedback? It must be very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, so as you said, the current consultation is live, and it's a bad idea to kind of telegraph any outcome or say too much about it. So I'll speak a bit more, generically. So if you've got a consultation question which is sort of based around, well, government has told us to implement the following policy, then the questions are about how you implement it. So if you get a load of responses back that say, well, I just don't agree with the policy, then you note that. You note the opposition to the policy, but you don't necessarily, you can't really take a lot from it, because the policy framework set by government is that I want you to implement these things. So what you then look at is what responses you get to the actual questions that you've asked. So then you're looking at, okay, so what's this telling us about whether this is possible in this way? Is it telling us about any particular burdens? Is it telling us about how things would really work, how well some of these things have been understood, how long it would take to implement it? You're looking at all of those sorts of things. And you are looking at, are there things in here that should be adjusted? So if you've proposed a particular thing as a question, should we do X or Y? You are looking at, okay, what's the preponderance of views here? But you're also looking at what evidence has been supplied with it, what explanation has been given. So if you get a sort of a blunt response of, I just don't think you should do this, then what you're really interested in is, well, what's the evidence base that supports your argument? And it's not necessarily about reams and reams of research or something, but you are looking for something that supports this. So if the industry responding, for example, thinks that this would have a perverse outcome for whatever reason, I'm not talking about financial risk checks. I'm talking about any kind of consultation. If they thought there was a perverse outcome, we'd expect them to set out, okay, so why do you think that, and what makes you think that, and what have you got to support it? Because that then helps us understand, okay, so there are some things here that we might need to adjust then if we were to go ahead and do this. Or it may be that some things, just wouldn't have the outcomes that you're looking for. So it depends on the type of consultation as well and how broadened out it is. Because sometimes you'd have a consultation where you're asking, how should this be approached? Other times you're saying, we have to do the following. How best do we do the following thing? So consultations can vary quite a lot. It is very complex, and it is based also around legalities. So if you don't consult in an appropriate way and it's not a genuine consultation, then that is something that can be challenged in court.
This seems like a good time to interject with what I will call a listener question. Evidence basis is a phrase that's come up a few times, right? Now, financial risk checks, which were just mentioned in a loose fashion. What is the evidence basis for the financial risk checks? Like the numbers, and please correct me if I'm wrong because you are here as the expert. £125 a month, £500 a year for light touch checks, £1,000 for 24 hours, £2,000 for 90 days for enhanced checks. Where do those numbers come from?
So those numbers really come from the research and analysis over the last few years. You will always have
by the Commission.
Well, it's a mixture of insight from the Commission and research by others, and DCMS, don't forget, pulled together the final white paper. So what the numbers do is they correspond, broadly speaking, to a proportionate level of risk. So if you think about the proportion of people who are potentially at risk from problem gambling in terms of spend, and spend is only one aspect of what we expect people to look at, then they broadly correlate in terms of the numbers of accounts that would be affected to the problem gambling rate. Now, those two groups of people will not overlap. Let's be clear about that. So what this is about is effectively early warning on the spend side. So this is not necessarily meaning that someone is having a problem. It's not meaning that they should stop necessarily. It's not sort of making a moral judgment, but it is, where is a reasonable position where you see a well above average level of expenditure that means you're in a relatively small percentage of accounts. And that's really where it comes from. And DCMS set these thresholds in the white paper that are test thresholds. They're not stop thresholds. So it comes from a series of bits of information really built up over time, plus responses to DCMS's call for evidence, which had, I can't remember now, I think it was something like 15,000 responses or something like that. I might have got that wrong, where people expressed different views on what they thought they should look like.
So, okay, and just want to join two dots here. So you're saying these are thresholds set by DCMS in the white paper, and it's your job to bring that to, or the Gambling Commission's job to bring that to life, and that's the role of that. It's not thresholds the Gambling Commission have set.
No, these are white paper thresholds. So likewise, the 3% of accounts number, which I'm sure we'll talk about, I think it'd be good. I'm sure it'll be good to kind of explain how that all fits together, because that is some ways straightforward and some ways complicated. It essentially comes down to what does enough data suggest is the right threshold, and we might see in the consultation responses something that says, here's reasons why those numbers aren't necessarily exactly the right ones. We'll see what we get in the responses.
What's the one of the difficulties in being me is I try and stay on top of everything everywhere, and then I ultimately fail at all of them. So if I am completely wrong, then please educate me. But with affordability checks, what's the state, or what's going forward with affordability checks? How does that impact the land-based industry?
So the stuff that's in the white paper about proposed frictionless financial risk checks doesn't affect the land-based industry. So it's not proposed at all that it would go to the land-based industry, partly because it's just something that would be very difficult to implement. So and we are going to have to look at, okay, so what's happening with retail in particular, which is a discussion I'm having with several operators at the moment, because they have to have some kind of intervention, because risk coming from spend is still something that they need to look at. But the introduction of these thresholds and these frictionless checks isn't proposed for land-based at all.
Okay, there's been, some interesting stuff happening in UK land-based right now. And when I say interesting, I'm not talking in a good way. So, extrapolation from a listener question. Fintan, stop me if I'm wrong, but I think this comes from a listener whose name we've changed.
Yeah, I wouldn't give his name.
To Steve. We'll call him Steve.
It's a good name.
And what Steve wanted to know is it's one particular part of the UK land-based casino industry seems to be particularly struggling at the moment, and it's a combination of forces. But the high-end casinos, all of which are in London, all of which are within 3 square miles.
Yeah.
So Ritz Club's gone. Obviously, that went a couple of years ago. Clermont's gone. Crockford's position is under review.
Yeah.
That would leave Playboy, Les Ambassadeurs. That's it, I think. So, they've been disproportionately hit by various pressures, but also fairly unique ones to a high-end customer. Is there anything in the white paper that's going to affect them further? I don't know. It's kind of an open-ended question. Have you got a question?
So, this is partly why the government has put, I think it might be Section 80, I can't remember, of the Gambling Act 2005. This is around acceptance of credit for effectively Mayfair casinos, as it gets described. Because one of the issues that's been facing high-end casinos for a long time is international banking checks. There's a whole range of issues facing them, and I was talking to the owners of Crockford's the other day, and there are a multitude of issues facing them. Things that are different in the UK market. There are also things to do with, what they've said about VAT for international customers, etc., which I'm obviously not going to get into at all. I'm just saying it's something they've cited, and there's a whole range of things. Changes around credit are intended by government to try and help them. In that sense, moves to cashless again for casinos is intended to help them. I don't think there are really things in the white paper that would necessarily, of their own, make things more difficult for them. Certainly not from the feedback they've given me. In terms of the high end side of it, the biggest thing that they're pressing for is the move to be able to accept credit, because it's not something that they can do right now, and that does give them issues around banking checks, etc., which is getting harder and harder for them to deal with.
Cashless thing is really fascinating, and looking at the way that the technology has evolved in the last 5 years, but certainly the last 10. And the potential that brings for data. But if people want to be anonymous, they will still manage to be anonymous. That's just the world. But cashless potentially brings so many colossal benefits. But what's the role of the commission in that? Is it just, well, God, just setting out the rules? Yeah, you can do this, go and do that. And then everybody goes and does it? Or is it something where, because it's relatively new, you got to keep like a close eye on it, see how it evolves, see if things need to change? How's that going to work?
It's probably the latter. So what we'll need to see from the industry is what safeguards they think they need to put in place to make cashless work. The thing that people worry about is the ability to constantly, for example, tap your debit card and spend at a higher velocity than you can do with some natural friction from cash. The idea really of using cash today, though, is really odd. If you look at some other countries, they're having quite bitter arguments about why you should allow cash at all, where people want to use it. So from the Commission's point of view, it will be about what are the safeguards in place when you change any of this. I think you're right. There will be, monitoring how it goes. I mean, a lot of operators, when I've talked to them, have said they're not suddenly expecting to introduce loads and loads of this stuff because there's a cost to upgrading the machines, there's a cost to making all of that work. So it's not like if you introduce cashless today, suddenly everywhere would be, having debit cards, etc., being used. And they do want to have the right kind of friction within that so that they're able to manage it and not have different problems. So it'll be a combination of those things when DCMS can make the changes to the legislation to allow it to be introduced.
But combined with single customer view, the potential for, cash is, well, there's a couple of things here, right? Cash is one of the few big efficiencies that a land-based venue can make still, because it's a very, very expensive thing to move and deal with. But the other side of it is, I think it's gone clean out of my head. The second part of that point, Fintan, what was I about to say?
But but it sounds more like a banking problem than a gambling legislation problem then, because
that was it. That was the thing. There's an enormous amount. There's a really high proportion of people in the UK that don't have a bank account.
Well, no, it's not. If you take this high-end market, if you're a high net worth from somewhere else in Europe, or heaven forbid, outside of Europe, and you're trying to transfer money in to your London high-end casino, if your bank isn't fully on board with that, like I don't know if you've ever received money from Malta. Like my bank interrogated me like I was funding terrorism, and it was like €500. So the banks have all been hit for so much money laundering fines across Europe. Every major bank's had some sort of issue that their willingness to take on any risk, particularly for this, unless it's in like the absolute billions, is just not there. So if they're worried about my 500 quid, they're really worried about that £500,000, which is enough. They're not making any money on it, but it's enough to trigger a huge banking fine if it turns out in the future that there was something behind that.
I think that, there are three things to pull out of what you said there. The first is, SCV, single customer view, that's currently an online thing, so that wouldn't really come into play here, and that would be if it ever happened, a much later extension of single customer view, and I'm not even sure if that would ever be on the cards. I think the Malta point's a really interesting one, because after Malta went on to the Financial Action Task Force grey list for money laundering, that definitely changed the risk profile for banking when Malta's concerned. So one of the operators with a license in the UK, or GB I should say to be accurate about it, that was disproportionately high in the complaints we receive about withdrawals, actually had the root of their problems with banking issues because of as a consequence of Malta's grey listing some years ago. So there's definitely a risk profile thing there in certain jurisdictions. I think, though, for high end, it's probably more about the credit point. than maybe it is about the banking point and as much about cashless, and that will be at the casino's risk. But I'm sure they will put things in place to know this person is good for the money and they have the means to get hold of it. I think there will be quite a few things to work through in much the way that you said, because if you take some of the high-end casinos, certainly the ones I visited, when you look at what their historic customer base has been, it has been from jurisdictions outside of Europe largely, in the Middle East, Far East, and that could cause some issues, I guess, in terms on banking profile. So I think that's something to bear in mind, as well.
And I think for that audience, like we had William Woodhams on from Fitstairs a while ago, and obviously his client base, same kind of thing. It's very high end, and realistically, rich people have options. So if they can't get what they want in London, they'll just go somewhere else where they will get what they want. Or if they're not happy with what they're being asked for, the same way rich people don't pay tax, right? If you've got enough money, you can pick and choose what you do. And I think it's quite their ability to move stuff elsewhere and go, well, I'll just have a great night out in Montenegro instead, I think was the example. That's very easy for them to do, and that's it. Like it's very hard to compete against that.
Can I just clarify for one moment here? I'm awfully sorry, but just so that I just let you know that I'm not a complete buffoon.
Go on.
The single customer view, of course, I wasn't suggesting that be a part of things for land-based, but if you combine it with cashless, then you have the potential for an all-round view of a customer, which doesn't exist currently.
That's true.
That's what I was getting.
True,
I wasn't sort of suggesting otherwise.
Yeah, no. I think that's right, John. I think I don't know that I'm certainly not clear that it will go as far as that, but and there are lots of people who are very nervous about to what extent do you want in society a view of the totality of someone's gambling. That's something that people do get sensitive about. I get accused of it quite a lot, that's my dream, and it I have different dreams, but that's a very, very complex. That is a very, very complex area. But to Fintan, your point about people can go elsewhere, I think that is always the challenge. So, I mean, and this is the point that people have made recently with, their arguments about VAT and various other things, or if you talk about source of funds checks, it really depends on then the regulations that are in place. So we're required to do certain things. We've got anti-money laundering checks, terrorist financing checks, and in a sense, for the government to say, well, we want to alleviate the prospect of someone going somewhere else, they would have to make decisions on, okay, what do we want those standards to be? And there's not been any sign of them wanting to move away from the position on AML and terrorist financing. And it is a really difficult one, though, because this is a subset of a different issue that government is trying to solve, and you will always have different appendices that kind of show, well, hang on, what were you really intending here? Because you will have high net worth individuals with huge amounts of disposable income who have historically enjoyed going to London and going to high-end casinos, and they have found that's got harder with some of the money laundering concerns. There are some who haven't been because of other travel concerns. There's competition from elsewhere. There are other things where they shouldn't have given a different kind of, potentially a disincentive. It's a more complicated picture than I think I can answer. But I think there are some things that the government has pulled out in the white paper that it wants to do. I don't know what the timescale of that will be yet, but I think the industry is positive about those changes, and we just need to see what effect they have.
Okay, that makes sense. You touched on the 3% of accounts, and I've read. Okay, the 3% of accounts has been complained about as a bad number. Can you talk about it?
Yeah, I can talk about it. Well, it has been complained about as a bad number. So let's start with that number and work our way in then. So the reason that we ended up talking about the 3% number is to give a sense of what is the scale of what we're actually interested in looking at for enhanced checks. And that is only 3% of accounts. Given that most people who gamble regularly have more than one account, it's a smaller number of people, right? So when people started to talk a while ago about, well, hang on a second, you're going to stop people putting a tenner on the Grand National or even a bit more on the Grand National, it was sort of to evidence, well, that's really not what anybody's interested in here. Hence, we talk about the 3% of accounts. 3% of accounts is an industry figure, and it's been extrapolated based on lots and lots of different data points about overall kind of spend levels as to how many would be in this. And one of the reasons it gets called a bad number, or one of the reasons I've seen it called a bad number, is people will say, but it's a much bigger proportion of active gamblers. Well, of course it is. That's basic maths. So let's deal with the maths point. If 86% of gross gambling yield comes from 5% of accounts, it's about 70% for sports betting, but it's only 1% of accounts, 70% from 1% of accounts for horse racing online, then it is mathematically obvious that if you're talking about looking at the higher spending end, that is a much greater proportion of income for operators than 3%. Okay, so it varies between operators. So some have said to me it's about 20% of income. William Woodham, who I've met, and he's a really interesting guy, and he's very generous with his time and insights. Actually, I had a really good conversation with him a couple of months ago. He said in an interview, I think with the Racing Post or with someone who was in the Racing Post anyway, recently, he thinks it's about 80% of his customer base. And that makes sense, given what he targets as a customer base. So the 3% isn't a bad number. It's just that people have tried to make it mean different things. So some have sort of mean, well, it only means 3% per operator. Well, that doesn't make sense. There would be a massive difference between what Tombola looks like and what Fitzdares looks like.
Yeah.
And who will be covered by an enhanced check will vary between operators. So if they've got a higher level of, let's call it leisure gambling, to use that term, or recreational gambling, however you want to describe it, then you'd expect a lower proportion of income to be covered than somebody, an operator that's got a bigger proportion of higher spending customers. And it will vary between sports as well, and vary between types of gambling because of the way that the people spend money. So it's not a bad number, but you have to use it in the right context, like any other number, really. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
It makes quite an annoying amount of sense. We've got to catch him on something, Fintan. Otherwise, people are going to accuse us of being brown noses.
But in all seriousness, I don't want to push my luck. This is part of the problem with the current debate. Is as soon as you introduce a number, people try and kind of pull the number down to try and distract from the principle. And actually, this is relatively simple but complicated. So the reason it's simple is we're talking about a pretty narrow cohort of consumers, but they are very active in higher spending. And as a part of business, unlike supermarkets, for example, which they'll have an average spend, and there'll be some people at the upper end who buy a lot of wine or whatever. But broadly speaking, it looks quite different. For gambling, it is very, very heavily weighted to a relatively small percentage of people, and therefore that income reliance will be a much bigger number than 3%. And that's what people need to remember. And we're not ignoring that, and we're not denying it, we're not disputing it. It's a really obvious point that a few people have kind of thrown around lately as though we'd not spotted that, but of course we have. That's why you've got to get the introduction of anything in this space right. Otherwise, you do genuinely risk damaging a very large proportion of income in the gambling industry without intending to.
So it's 3% of accounts, it's not 3% of revenue. And that's
no, it'll be nothing like that. And
exactly.
But it will vary between operators. So William saying he thinks it's about 80% of his customers makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, I haven't seen the numbers or verified it, but it doesn't sound crazy to me. But I would expect some other operators in fact I know that is a much lower proportion, but it's a lot more than 3%.
he had a great quote in that Racing Post article, which I just thought was actually brilliant. Which one of the reasons I love William is just brilliant at branding. And it was, he reckons by the third race on the first day of Cheltenham, he'd have to be asking people for their bank statement or their P60 or something like that. And I just thought, A, it's a good way of making your point, but it also just really advertised who his client base is and where you want to be gambling if you're a VIP. It was just so, I don't know, I just really enjoyed it.
Fintan is, I don't know if you listened to that episode, Andrew. Presumably you're a regular listener. But
that's what we tell the advertisers.
Fintan's just after a hippo.
I am. They've got a swag store thing, and they've got this beautiful hippo that I've got my heart set on.
I mean, it's better than he's making it sound.
When you're in their little, not their little, when they had their members club. It's what they.
I don't think William wants you to call his members club just some little club.
I know exactly. I backtracked.
He's very proud of it. He's very proud of it,
and he should be. He should be. It's where they serve the Scotch egg in the little hippo. It's just
the Scotch egg hippo.
I'll tell you what. For an industry with, it's just so bad at branding. It's just great to see somebody doing it right. Anyway, that's a different story. Okay, so the 3% makes sense, and I can then obviously see why. Some people would be up in arms because it would be a huge portion of their business revenue-wise, and maybe quite a lot of their accounts as well, depending on the type of customer they're going after. And obviously, there's a consultation process happening right now, so we can't get too much into that. The legitimate markets. You touched on the. I think there's probably the other one that gets bandied about. Then maybe we can touch on that one instead. There's the, how would you put it? There's the specter of, if regulation is too strict, everybody's going to go offshore. And the UK market's obviously a very open market compared to a lot of other countries. So there's a lot of licensed operators. There's a lot of brands. It's in a way, like historically, the offshore market, I think in the UK hasn't really been an issue because it's just, there's been so much choice in the UK market and regulation's been very consumer friendly from a gambling perspective. When we look at other countries, like if we look at online casino in Germany, so the regulations and stuff that came in Germany, which basically crucified online casino, probably bad phrase words, but very, very bad killed the product. So if you're a casino player, it's a very, very bad experience now. Spain, to a degree as well, in terms of no bonuses. Sweden was a great example during COVID, where really tight deposit restrictions and loss restrictions, and there's really good examples of where regulation gets too much. The internet, the competition's just a click away, and it's an easy click away. And I know the industry's tried to. So when you look then at the UK, so there's some really, really obvious examples, and it's super obvious that it's actually huge. And even Sweden now, things have changed. Like the offshore Sweden is still huge. They're still reeling from that. I know there's the gambling industry put out its own research on offshore, and there was a mixed reaction to that. Based on my own kind of experiences, I do believe there is an offshore. I believe it's very easy for people to go offshore. And, crypto is a very simple way to bypass a lot of restrictions and, a crypto wallet and a VPN, and you can pretty much do whatever you want. What's your view on how big the illegitimate market is, or the risk faced by the illegitimate market? And how do you strike the balance between everything that happens in the industry is oh my God, everyone's going to go offshore, versus the reality of, they will. It'll probably take quite a lot, but it's actually just there ready to go. Not really, I don't know, just get what's your thoughts, I suppose, is the question.
Yeah, so this is a difficult one. So there isn't actually a lot of research in this area. There's very little that's of any kind of heavyweight. So
Fintan did some though.
People,
Just-
people
I'll send you my PDF.
that'd be great. Yeah, I'll send it on to the UK stats authority. See what they think.
don't.
But no, in all seriousness, there isn't a lot of research in this area. So we set out, I think back in May, our evidence gaps and priorities for the next 3 years or so. I think it was, and this is one of them. And we've got some people actively involved in this, trying to estimate the size of it. But it is very, very difficult. I mean, channelization in our market. So this is, how much can you bet on? Is 97.6%. It's the largest, I think, of any European market. It's probably the largest in the world. And that does mitigate a lot against illegal gambling. And some of the research that's been quoted relatively recently about a growth, when you get further into that research, actually the growth has been in targeting the self-excluded and not on GamStop and kids, unfortunately, because these people are entirely unscrupulous. I get misquoted on this quite a lot because I've said I think the risk is overstated, and I think people sort of saying you change anything, everybody's going with the black market. I just don't think it's true, but I don't think there is no risk. And if you think about some of what's happening in Europe, they have got very significant illegal markets because they're not being met in the legitimate market. Germany, and I'm not criticizing other nations, Germany's got a €1,000 deposit limit a month. I was at the G7 European regulators meeting a couple of weeks ago, and listening to what Germany are doing, what Spain are planning to do, and different nations. And we're not in anything like that sort of position in terms of how they want to deal with spend, etc. So I don't think we're facing those sorts of things. How big is it? It's very hard to say. Different people will tell you different things. I don't think, kind of some of the surveys in some publications are really very helpful. They certainly wouldn't meet any kind of standard to rely on. But we have to be very wary of this. What we see in terms of the actual traffic and activity is mostly online casino rather than anything else, because of course that is tilted to the house anyway in terms of profitability. We have taken quite a lot of action with getting things geo-blocked. I know there are VPNs that come up the select committee as well. I'm not saying it's foolproof, but we have seen significant drops in traffic in the sort of biggest operators who are operating illegally. We've done a lot of work with Google getting things blocked, but there's a lot more that needs to happen. There is definitely a risk, as there always is in any form of regulation, that if you take the regulation to the point where you restrict people who ought not to be restricted, then you run the risk of them either dropping out of the legitimate market altogether, which is actually what a lot of people will do. A lot of people will not want to give any kind of financial information to an illegal operator. I mean, there is an oddity in some of the Twitter traffic I get, where people will sort of say, I don't want bookmakers to know things about me, so I'm going to go to an illegal operator where you're presumably sharing your financial details. I find that a strange argument to make, but I do get the worries that people have about personal data, which is something we should perhaps talk about a little bit. But it is difficult to estimate, and we do need to do more work in this area. But I think if you were to say to everybody, well, if you want to spend more than £1,000 a year, you've got to provide the following information, you would drive huge unintended consequences, which is not what we're proposing. That's the whole point of the frictionless point in the white paper, is that if you didn't have that happening in a way that didn't involve people doing things they really don't want to do, setting aside for a second, and I don't mean I'm dismissing the argument, I just mean setting aside for a second that some people just don't agree that any checks should take place. They believe in the sense of personal responsibility, and we should just pay for treatment for people who've got problems. Setting that aside for 1 second, you have got to get the balance in the right place. But it's also worth me saying on this particular sort of sub point about risk checks, what's happening today is clearly not frictionless, and that's why a better solution is needed. That is, stating the obvious, I think.
Yeah, and we've had some people on with different solutions.
Charles Cohen, Department of Trust.
Yeah, using open banking, there does seem to be a lot of in a way the open there's finally a use for open banking. Sorry, some past trauma at a previous company. but there does feel like solutions that way are coming, which could help a lot.
Yeah. There are lots of different potential solutions out there. I think it depends what data sets you want to look at. Are you looking at debt, for example? Are you looking at missed payments? Are you trying to look at income data? Because building an income picture is quite difficult to do. So that's part of the discussions that we're having at the moment with financial services, credit reference agencies, with the industry. What are the right kinds of things to look at to give you a genuine risk picture of someone's gambling, where they are in that higher spending area. It doesn't mean that they can't afford it. It doesn't mean that they should stop. It just means that you don't know enough about them at this point in time to know that they can go beyond a certain level, and we have to find a way of doing that minimizes any kind of disturbance to them, because that's a poor customer journey.
Yeah. So just one point you made about the offshore and providing personal data. And you're not sure why people would do that. You really don't have to. Like the whole.
I meant in terms of your payment. I meant in terms of making payments. I think.
Like your credit card details or something.
Yeah. Which is hence your point about crypto. I mean that strikes me as a kind of double gamble in a sense, because of the volatility of crypto. So you could win your bet but lose all your money anyway. I mean, that is something that we're working with the Financial Conduct Authority on, because as the Financial Conduct Authority is trying to bring some regulation around cryptocurrencies, albeit it wouldn't be like fiat currency at all, they are giving, or will be giving, I don't know if they've done it yet, kind of basic advertising permissions, etc. If we identify that cryptocurrencies, or particular cryptocurrencies, are being used as part of illegal gambling, that's something that the FCA can get involved in. I mean, that's a very early discussion we've had with them. We are trying to find all the different ways that we can disrupt illegal gambling as far upstream as we possibly can. Chasing individual websites to shut them down, is fine, but they open again in a slightly different guise very quickly.
It's just a whack-a-mole thing. Australia tries to do that, and by the time they've released the list, all the URLs are redirected to the next casino. So
of course they are, and the French have got a new power where they can, without a court order, get an IP address or a domain taken down, but another one will appear. So we've done work with payment providers as well, again trying to disrupt the flow of money. But the research has indicated certainly around illegal gambling at scale, it's actually very difficult to enter the UK market. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm not saying it isn't easy to do if you go and search for it. Of course, that's why we're targeting sort of effort through Google and search results and domains, etc. But actually, it's quite hard to compete because of how well established the legitimate industry is and high channelization. But again, that's not to dismiss it. People do like to say that I don't believe this is real. The other issue I've had is people in the industry will sort of say, I know that, X customers have gone to an illegal operator. And I will always say, well, tell me who they've gone to, if you know. And quite often, and I've started to get some intelligence from people now, because I don't know why there's been a reticence to do that. And I did say at the select committee, when I've asked that question, I get nothing back. And that doesn't mean that they don't exist just because somebody hasn't told me their names. It means that we've got to get better between the industry and the regulator in providing actionable information as well, particularly with, a lot of, certainly illegal operators want high spending customers who are potentially quite risky, because that's where you make the most money, because they're totally unscrupulous. They're not here to, give you a good experience and make sure that your well-being is taken care of. They are only interested in taking as much money off you as they possibly can. And we do have to get better at sharing information.
And I do agree with your point as well. I think if I was setting up an offshore casino and I was going to target a particular country, like the UK would be way down the list. There's much easier options with a lot less competition. So I do get your point of it's quite hard. Not that it's quite hard to target the UK. It's just, if you look at it from a pure ROI perspective, there's better countries.
Yeah, the effort would be disproportionate to the benefit if you thought about it in a commercial sense, but in a criminal commercial sense.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not the same as other markets in Europe, which are more restricted than ours. I mean, the Danes have made a point several times at international conferences in comparing themselves to our market, our channelization, and that's where they would like to move towards. I met with the government of New Zealand in London. They were over here, and I met with them at the High Commission in London and not in New Zealand, as several people have claimed. So I didn't fly to New Zealand for one meeting, but I met with them, and they're hoping to start to bring in online regulation, and certainly they were more interested in the liberal end side of it, so that they could essentially avoid some of the problems that they're seeing elsewhere in the world. I mean, it remains to be seen what different markets, as they emerge in gambling regulation, do.
Yeah, Australia is a good example of what not to do as well, I think. From that perspective, you said we should touch on personal data. I just made a note of it. I wasn't sure what the question was, but you said we should maybe come back to personal data.
I think it's that. So we covered quite a bit of it. I think this is what people are concerned about with financial risk checks, that they will be directly sharing their personal data with bookmakers in the way that they might have to do now. The idea is, with all the data protection agreements with the Information Commissioner's Office, is to not do that. Is to try and use third parties. Is to restrict actually how much data is shared. People do have a natural concern about sharing personal data with anyone. Actually, I think that's perfectly reasonable. It's something we're all conditioned to do. And that is a big factor in the thinking behind, okay, so how do we address this issue? Because what are we really trying to solve here? Because some people will sort of say, oh, well, it's because Andrew Rhodes or the Commission or whatever wants people to spend less on gambling. That's just not the case at all. We're trying to guard against people spending amounts of money that they clearly don't have. And that puts them in a terrible position. It brings the industry into disrepute. It create a political desire to do something about it, and it's something that is a solvable problem, albeit hard. So when you've got a nurse on 30,000 a year spending 250,000, that can't ever be a good position, and it's those sorts of things that we're trying to guard against. And nobody is trying to stop someone who's got the money to spending it on gambling. And I said in November last year at an industry conference that we hosted, it's not for the Gambling Commission to have a moral judgment on how much people should spend on gambling. But we do have an obligation under our statutory obligations to make sure that people don't have severe adverse consequences, particularly ones that can be avoided. That's really, really tricky, particularly when some people do think, and I get it, that this really comes down to personal responsibility. But how do you deal with the position when someone loses the ability to exercise personal responsibility? And that all wraps us back into issues around how you share data, where it comes from, and how you do this in the best way possible.
So all right, so we're coming up on 2 hours, right? And there's gonna be a lot of listeners to this episode, and some of them are going to be foaming at the mouth from one direction or the other, because you're either being too reasonable or not being tough enough, which is unfortunate, because that goes back to our thing of like, it's ultimately everything we've talked about today is nuance. And the right answer is it's difficult and we'll need to figure it out. And it kind of goes back to your what's the outcome we're aiming for, and keeping that kind of front and center. What's the one thing you'd like to say to the industry? You'd like them to take away from this?
Oh, that's good.
That is a good question. What would I want them to take away from it? What we are trying to do here is make sure the industry can succeed and exist in an entirely compliant way. And we're not here to try and thwart it. I've been an active gambler myself for over 20 years. I'm not against gambling, but I can hold two thoughts in my head: that millions of people can enjoy gambling in one way or another every year but some people can be severely impacted. And I want to make sure the balance in those things is right. And that's what we're trying to get out of this. We're not trying to frustrate anyone's enjoyment, and we're not trying to be negligent towards people who ought to be protected. So my message to the industry is we're very much an impartial, balanced regulator. And I'll say now what I've said to everybody in the industry I've spoken to. We're interested in compliance at the earliest possible opportunity. We're not here to be draconian. We're here to make sure that the industry can solve its problems and do it as quickly as possible. But these are complicated things that we're working through, and you'll only get good answers to those things if you approach it in the right way. And that's what we're here for. And I think we've got a much better relationship with the industry in the last few years. Others will judge, and some will be critical of that, and that's up to them. But that's what I think we're trying to do at the moment, and that's what I'm committed to in my job. Difficult as that is, you're quite right. There'll be people listening to this who'll be foaming at the mouth in one direction or another. Who'll be clipping bits out. Who'll be taking sentences and doing what they want to do with them. That's not really the audience we're trying to speak to. We're trying to give some balance in what is a very complex and emotive debate.
Boom.
Speaking of the industry, though, right? We haven't touched on the industry forum yet, have we?
No, we haven't. No.
And I remember when I saw that, I think it might come in the Gambling Commission bulletin. I can't remember. And I was like, holy shit, I was not expecting that. So that, I mean, to me, that sort of came out of left field. Probably everybody else knew. But you probably went around saying to people, look, we're going to do this industry forum. Don't tell John. How's that going to work? How is it? Has it started? Where's my invite?
So it hasn't started yet. No, we'll be recruiting for a chair of it. John's looking for listeners. John's looking very excited now. So the industry forum is about essentially trying to formalize the plugging of a particular gap. So the engagement between the commission and the industry there's a huge amount of it, right? There's a massive amount of it, both me personally and lots of other people in the commission. We speak to, as I said, 220 stakeholder engagements last year. And so we liaise with the commission. We liaise with the industry very, very regularly on things we're doing. It is quite helpful sometimes if you can formalize that and you say, well, there is a forum here, to which we take particular things that we want to get a collective view. One of the reasons that can be very useful is we obviously engage directly with people in the industry. We engage with trade bodies, but you always get either the view of one organization if you're talking to an individual one, or with a trade body you get something that is quite filtered, and that's just the nature of trade bodies. I'm not looking to criticize them. So what you would want in an industry forum, I think, is a balance of different people from across the industry. There are some questions about, different types of people who should be involved, or organizations that should be involved in the forum. And I think we still need to work some of that out, because it was a relatively recent development that we were going to do this. Particularly, I think it's important as we navigate through the next few years of delivering the white paper and, of course, evaluating the changes that have been made. One of the things that is baked into what we're doing over the next few years is a much greater degree of evaluation in terms of the changes we make. So I think having a forum for that, which sits alongside the existing advisory bodies that we've got. So we've got a lived experience one, which is based on people with lived experience of either themselves or as normally a family member from problem gambling related harm. We've got a digital advisory panel who are experts in data and technology, and we've got an advisory body on safer gambling who are experts in the field around sort of academia and study. So this sits alongside that, and that's what we're trying to do, is square that circle a bit. A lot of it was happening anyway, so it's trying to formalize it. So that's something over the next few months that we should see a bit more movement on.
That's pretty exciting. Like I say, it was a total shock. But then it comes back to what we were talking about in the first episode this week about the less, you used a brilliant word, less, oh crap, I can't remember what the brilliant word was. That adversarial relationship with the industry. and more kind of, we don't have to always get on, but we do have to always talk. It's
Yeah,
like
I think,
a good marriage.
but I don't think people should misinterpret it
I would
either.
imagine.
I don't see that why we should have to have an adversarial relationship with anyone. But that doesn't mean that you're then not upholding standards. We've just had the largest year ever in terms of enforcement penalties. I don't say that as a thing I'm proud of. These things shouldn't be necessary, but you can uphold standards, but also have a reasonable dialogue and relationship with the groups that you regulate, as well as lots of other interested parties who've got very strong views. I think that is our job. Difficult as it is, and it doesn't have to be adversarial with anyone. It is difficult when people want you to take sides or they have very strong views about another party, but it's not our job to engage in that. It's our job to be the sensible, balanced, impartial regulator at the middle of it. Plenty would argue that they've got their views that we're not, and they're entitled to that view. But that's why we publish what we do, and that's why I'm happy to answer questions on why we do certain things and what the thinking is, because I think it's important to expose that.
Speaking of choosing sides, though, Fintan is very much Cobra Kai. I'm Eagle Fang. That's my spiritual dojo. What's your spiritual dojo, Andrew?
Oh, well, I think I would be, old school Miyagi-Do, isn't it? I watched the first couple of seasons of Cobra Kai, but it started to peter out for me. And to be honest, I don't want to talk about this with you because the two of you besmirched The Lincoln Lawyer, and I really enjoyed it. And I've read all the books, so I feel I enjoyed it on a slightly different level.
It was okay.
No, I thought your abuse of it was pretty purient, and to us, it was borderline whether I'd even come on this podcast after that.
Tell them what you think, Andrew. Tell them what you think.
Yeah, no,
I
enjoyed it.
Have you read any John Grisham?
I don't. You know what? I don't think I have. I don't think I have read any John Grisham. And given that I know you have very strong views on that, so even if I had, I'm not sure I would confess to it now.
But I just found one that wasn't shite. It was the 10th book I read, and it wasn't dreadful.
Do you know after the first three, did you not think maybe I should stop now?
Well, no. Then it became a crusade. And you keep reading all these writers that say this guy's like the best thriller writer on the planet. He's not even the best thriller writer probably in his family.
But you can't equate sales volume with writing it. Like 50 Shades of Grey sold a lot of books.
No.
That's
But
dreadful.
Other writers have said this guy's the best thriller writer on the planet. He's just not. He writes books for people that don't read books.
Well, it's not a kind of summer holiday, I'm going to sit on the sun lounger and read a book kind of book.
Yeah, but if I'm on holiday, I'm on a sun lounger. If I've only read one book by the end of the week, then I haven't truly relaxed.
I have a bigger issue with the number of big authors we've seen over the years where probably as they start to get older, perhaps, I don't know, and they don't want to do it anymore, but where they kind of write it in partnership with someone, and then they're not really the same. When I was much, much, much younger, I mean, it was so long ago I had hair, I used to read, I read all of Clive Cussler's books, and then he started writing them with lots of other people, and I just thought they just weren't the same. And I noticed, I've not read any James Patterson either. My wife's read a lot of them, but I've noticed, I was in Tesco yesterday, and I think there were like 3, or no, I think there were 5 or 6 books in total between Clive Cussler's name and James Patterson's name that I don't think either of them were necessarily, well, maybe James Patterson was, but I don't like that.
Well, interestingly, Lee Child, who must be one of the bigger writers in the world at the moment with the Jack Reacher series, has written
with his brother,
his
brother Andrew Child, yeah, I've read them both. Yeah, I've read. Oh, was it 2 or 3 of them? Yeah.
It's already started devolving, for want of a better way to put it. It's already a bit meh.
Well, I thought the first one they did together, I wasn't a huge fan on, but the last one I thought was more typical of what he's written before.
What about the thing where the author dies, but then it's carried on by somebody that can write a bit like them? So, like, one of my favorite writers of all time is Robert B. Parker, the fabulous American writer of multiple different series, incredibly prolific. Wrote a series of books with a character called Spencer, where Spencer is spelled like the poet. And he died. Interestingly, when he was alive, he actually finished some of the works of Dashiell Hammett, because it's a really similar style. This really kind of economical prose, really very good writer. And it was taken over by a dude called Ace Atkins, and within a couple of books, he'd nailed it. I mean, he was like absolutely dead on. Now Atkins has stopped because he's written about 10, and now somebody else is taking on. It's madness. Where does it end? It's like Russian dolls.
They've done that with, I think it's the Fleming Foundation, maybe license it, but people do write James Bond novels under
Charlie
sort of
Hickson,
under license.
who's a terrific writer.
And
They do it
Sebastian
with-
Folks did one which was really good.
They do it with the Godfather series as well. There was a whole,
really?
after Mario Puzo, there was a whole series of
I bet they're all really good as well.
No, they're not.
Really?
Well,
I'm
it's
stunned.
yeah, but then there was the famous fantasy one is Robert Jordan and the Wheel of Time. So it's this like huge 8-9 series books that was still like 3 or 4 books left to go. He died. He took so long he died, and then somebody took over. But actually, the guy who took over was significantly better, and actually managed to wrap up the series in a really good way. And then the same will happen with the Game of Thrones. The George R. He hasn't finished that series in the books.
He is quite old now.
George R. And he's famous for procrastination. So.
Is this the point in the podcast? It's like the credits in like a Marvel film.
It's the post-credit
Where-
sequence, yeah.
If you stick all the way through to the end, there's a really good bit at the end that you wish
Oh,
you'd
no, there's
listened
no,
to.
no, we're out of good
No,
bits.
we're just
No,
gonna-
it's
gonna
how we
stop.
humanize you. So we bring your personality
thanks.
to life now. and,
Thank you.
know, just-
I feel better for that. Thanks ever so
That's
much.
But we're not magicians.
you have to work with us.
The Gambling Files podcast, where careers come to die.
I don't
Mostly
need a license.
So, I'm so happy that I agreed to do this.
No, we're pleased too. And we'd like to thank our sponsors. Which reminds me, if anybody from the Gambling Commission is listening, sponsorship packages are available.
Well, if he's not allowed to take a cup of coffee, they're not going to be able to sponsor stuff either.
No, but that's them giving us stuff. It's different.
Yeah, we won't be doing that.
No, they can't do that either. It'd be,
You don't know that, Fintan.
it's-
or-
there'd be
I
rules.
just
If
told you we
anybody-
couldn't do it.
He's
That's
not an MP.
enough.
Like if it was an MP, it'd be like we could do anything. But like it's civil service has actually got rules. It's completely different.
What rules?
Well, he's not allowed to take a cup of coffee off someone.
Fintan, I'm a classic lone wolf. I don't understand rules.
You'll never get rugby tickets. It's ridiculous.
I don't want rugby. I wouldn't mind some football tickets. No, actually, I wouldn't want football tickets.
I wouldn't mind tickets to the Ireland-New Zealand game, if anybody's listening.
Fintan, you can't do that. Because
I can
this
do
is
that.
guilt by association now.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Andrew, though, I believe is a supporter of, stop me if I'm wrong, Swansea City.
I am indeed. I went to the Plymouth away game on Saturday where we won 3-1.
I was going to say it's quite a long journey, but it's really not.
It was a very, very long journey. It's a long bus ride down to.
But it's not like, I don't know, Hull to Plymouth. I mean, it's like you
No,
sort
I
of
think
go along.
I think as a club we clock up a lot of miles because of where we are. I think the longest one for us is probably Sunderland. I think that's
that.
I think it's more of a
quite fun.
pilgrimage than an away.
The thing
day.
is, as well, getting from Swansea to anywhere, unless you're going across to Cardiff and then out, it's like, well, I'm a Shropshire person, and there is no quick way to get anywhere in Shropshire.
No, there
It
isn't.
doesn't matter what road you're on, you're going to meet a tractor, and it's a company car. Don't get me wrong, the tractor. I mean. So it's similar from Swansea. As soon as you're not going to Cardiff, you're like on some tricky little A or B road and you're going over a mountain.
You do know the M4 goes beyond Cardiff, though, don't you? I mean, and there are like
I'm just
trains
saying.
and stuff.
No, and actually the Swansea London line is very good. But no, what I'm saying is you're going to that bit because once you be on Cardiff, Bristol and everything spreads out there, and you got the Cardiff to Manchester line, all of that jazz. I'm just saying that first bit, that part is easy, but if you want to come up
if you want to go north, yeah, because when I got up to Birmingham, I either change at Bristol and get, I don't know, the Edinburgh or Manchester train or something, or you change at Cardiff and you go up along the River Severn and all of that. It's much easier for me to go to London, actually, because it's just straight through. But that's just like train bore stuff.
Yeah, I've fallen asleep on that train a couple of times, but heading down on the Manchester train, and I've meant to change at Bristol, woke up in Cardiff. It didn't go very well. But I'm surprised you don't have like a nice company vehicle with heated seats and stuff.
No.
Sorry.
Oddly not.
But I'm out of questions because I'm not going to ask you about what streaming services you subscribe to, because I don't want anybody thinking you've taken a gift from Disney. Do you get Disney Plus though?
No.
It's very good, isn't it, Fintan?
It is. If you like Star Wars, it's great.
Well, it's got Only Murders in the Building on it as well, which is phenomenal.
Worth it. That's worth the subscription. It's such a good show.
Truly is. I'm just about to start on the 3rd season.
Oh, we're 2 episodes in.
I'm right in the thick. This is going to sound so bad. I'm right in the thick of Gilmore Girls.
Oh, my wife's watched all of that. Yeah.
It's pretty promising. I'm about halfway through the 1st season and I'm starting to find its rhythm. Yeah, it's good.
I watched the first 2 episodes of Continental on Amazon Prime.
Oh, yeah?
Which was...
Hang on, you watched the first 2 and then you bailed? I mean, it's only a 3.
No, there were only 2. Sorry, there were only 2. I didn't watch the first 2 and bail. I presume it's a slow release thing.
What's it
so
about?
You don't binge it all. It's the John Wick. It's a prequel to John Wick.
Ah.
So it's very, very John Wick. It's very
in a shocking casting move, they've cast Mel Gibson as one of the leads.
Oh, yeah. I've seen the posters for that. I thought it was like some hotel thing or something. Yeah.
No, it's not like Fawlty Towers. It's like Fawlty Towers if it was tremendously violent.
But the thing with Mel Gibson, all of the controversy aside and all of the stupid shit that he's done and said, people forget one thing. One of his great he is a phenomenal director. And I'm not looking at Braveheart because I really didn't like Braveheart at all. If you watch Apocalypto, it's a stunningly well done movie. It's a movie with no English in it at all. Passion of the Christ, it's a beautifully made film. That dude can tell stories. If only he wasn't completely bonkers. Although maybe the two things have to coexist.
Given he's got some very, very expensive lawyers, I just want to sort of just quietly disassociate myself from any critical marks of anyone who's got good lawyers. Thank you.
I think he'd probably agree with me. But, yeah. I don't know.
It's a good publicity.
But Andrew Rhodes, thank you very, very much for joining us.
Yeah, this has been brilliant. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you both for having me. I really appreciate it.
If you've enjoyed this episode of the Gambling Files podcast, please find us on LinkedIn. Give us a big, juicy, succulent like. That nearly went wrong. You can find us under the name The Gambling Files Podcast. You can find us on Twitter under The Gambling Files. I think the handle is just @GamblingFiles. You can connect to myself, John Bruford, or Fintan Costello, also on LinkedIn. We're also both on Twitter. And you can find all of our previous episodes at www.thegamblingfiles.com. If you enjoyed it, please share, tell your friends, tell your family, tell your colleagues, and we'll see you next time.